Welcome back, everybody. I'm so happy, but not surprised, to see a full house here for this next session, which I think is one of the key panels that we have on the stage today. My name is Geraldine de Bastion, and I have the honor of guiding you through the program here at the Fashion Sustain stage. And yeah, I'm really excited about this next panel session, which is going to look at 10 years of fashion sustainability. This year, Neonyt is celebrating those 10 years as the first green trade showroom that was the predecessor of Neonyt took place exactly around 10 years ago. And the Neonyt folks and all the people involved in that feel that there must have been something in the air back then, because it seems like a bunch of other sustainability platforms and lifestyle brands and sustainability initiatives in fashion were founded around the same time, also around a decade ago. And it's been 10 busy years for the pioneers of this scene, getting the whole topic about sustainability in fashion out of the niche and into the mainstream. So I'm very excited to have four fantastic women on stage with me today to share their experiences of 10 years in sustainability in fashion. Please give it up for Magdalena Schaffrin from Neonyt, Greenshowroom, Orsola de Castro from Fashion Revolution, Amanda Johnston from Sustainable Angle, and Sara Marie Sperling from the Green Tech Festival. I will come in the middle if that's okay. Yeah, big rounds of applause. And maybe one of you can join over here.
Thank you.
So allow me one or two sentences of background on each one of the panelists before we kick off the discussion today. On the far right, Sara Marie Sperling is representing the Green Tech Festival, which took place in May under the motto Celebrating Change, and was really one of these sort of nexus points of bringing people together who don't really have the platform and the visibility that they should have in society today, celebrating green technology and giving a bit of a look into the future about where we can go in the attempt to save our planet with innovation. And I'm looking forward to you sharing some more of your work there.
Thank you.
Orsola, I'm sure most of you will know, and is really one of the key people in this scene and one of the forward thinkers that is sort of shaking all the other sleepers in the world up today. She is the co-founder and creative director of Fashion Revolution, and of course a fashion designer and campaigner that has founded a number of initiatives. In fact, we've got one of your colleagues joining us on the next panel on upcycling, which I'm also excited about. You have managed to create cooperations with leading brands to, as I said, try to get these topics out of the niche, including Tesco and Topshop. And of course, the Fashion Revolution is handled as the fashion activism campaign, really opening people's eyes to where our clothes come from. And you'll be sharing more about that later on as well. To my left, I'm honored to be joined by Amanda Johnston, who's a curator and consultant at the Sustainable Angle, and has curated sustainable textile collections, Fabric Expo, which is also something that's been around for about a decade now, and you have grown into something big, which you're going to be sharing with us today. You're also co-author of two books, Fabric for Fashion and Fabric for Fashion, the Swatch book. And you also teach in London to make sure that the knowledge you've accumulated passes on to future-thinking minds as well. So welcome and thanks for being here with us today. And of course, last but not least, super excited to be joined by Magdalena, who's one of the organizers and one of the creators behind all of this that you're enjoying here. About 10 years ago, she organized the Greenshowroom, which was, as I said, the predecessor of Neonyt, co-founded the creative agency Kaleidoscope Berlin, and has really been at the sort of heart and mind of everything that you're experiencing here in this fantastic fair and event around sustainable fashion. So a big welcome to all of you. Okay, so I'd love to have a first sort of round. As I said, I'm sure many people in the audience today are very familiar with you and your work, but I would like to invite everybody sort of to come along on the journey that you've had. And I do want to open this up for your questions and comments toward the last third of this conversation. But maybe we can begin by you each explaining a little bit, what was your point of inspiration? How and why did you get into all of this and not sort of end up having a career in what we would call fast fashion or mainstream fashion today? Do you want to kick off the round?
I can do that. Thank you for the nice introduction, and thank you all for being here and listening to us. With me, I mean, I started my career 2005 when I was finishing my fashion design studies, and I was thinking what I was going to do with my time and my energy. And since I didn't have had the opportunity to be or like work as a fashion designer in one of the sustainable fashion brands, because by then there was not so many on the market, I decided to found my own brand under my name, and a couple of years later I was meeting Jana Keller, and she had also her own brand. So that's how we came up with the idea to found the Greenshowroom, because we were both looking for a platform to expose our brands, but we didn't want to go to one of these like really like granola eco trade fairs, and we were not really we were not feeling like being well represented on one of the normal like fashion trade fairs. So that's why we thought like, and it was actually so naive as I tell it here, why not do it on our own? It's probably not too complicated to just do a showroom and find others who are also working in this field of sustainability and fashion and have like great collections to show. This is how it all started. So then we decided to do it and call it Greenshowroom, and we had our first edition in July 2009. We decided for a 5-star hotel, the Hotel Adlon, to expose 16 designers, including us. And yeah, we're already having like cooperation with the Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week by then, had like a fashion show running in one of the rooms of Hotel Adlon, and yeah, and so on.
And we're going to get into everything that's happened in between. Amanda, what was your point of departure?
My point of departure was, well, I'd worked in the industry as a designer, so I'm trained as a designer for over 25 years, and progressively became more and more sick as it began to speed up and witness practices that none of us are comfortable with. So I took a sort of step back from my career, and I began to think about how I would reframe myself as I was trained as a designer within the industry. And through that, scoping around what I might be doing next with my career, I met up with a very dear friend of mine, Professor Dilys Williams, who heads up the Centre for Sustainable Fashion at London College of Fashion. And she was desperately in need of teachers, and I never really thought about that as an option, but as soon as I did it, I fell in love with it, and still continue to teach at London College of Fashion today. And it was Dilys who's responsible for infecting me with a positive infection of sustainability, and we worked together at London College of Fashion over about 15 years ago to try to begin embedding sustainable thinking within the curriculum, and that's how that whole journey started. And it's also through Dilys that I met Nina Morenzi, who's the founder of The Sustainable Angle. At that time, I just had a book published, and Dilys connected us, and we got on like a house on fire, and of course, I joined The Sustainable Angle, and I've been with them ever since. We've grown massively. We've been waiting for the tipping point to come in sustainability and fashion. We felt like we were always barking up trees and nobody was listening to us, although it was always the same few people listening to us, interestingly, a core gang of sustainable thinkers. But we really felt a surge in industry in 2017 when we held what was then quite a small expo, and the tickets sold out within about a week of putting them on that, and that was unprecedented. And we realized we could just feel this groundswell of change. That year, 3 really important reports became publicly available. The first one, the Pulse report from the Copenhagen Fashion Institute, and it spoke to the fashion industry rather than speaking in a very sciencey way. And as I said, freely available for everybody to download. That was chased by the Greenpeace Fashion at the Crossroads report, which I love because it calls into question quite a lot of the sort of assertions that were made by the Pulse report. So it makes interesting reading as the follow-up. And then, of course, by the end of the year, Ellen MacArthur released A New Textiles Economy, sort of really pushing forward the idea that we need to be thinking about retaining our materials, the value within them, thinking about circular systems. So that's when we felt this tidal wave of demand and an urgency for what we were doing. And so we increased the size of our expo by 10 times. Very happy to have Orsola there alongside us as well. So I think we feel that we're in a really, really exciting moment in time within the industry right now. Things are really beginning to change. So we feel great hope going forward. And our next expo will be end of January 2020.
Excellent, thank you so much. I want to get back to those key factors that have led to the shift that we're experiencing now with the rest of you, but it was very good to have some super concrete and also really good recommendations for those who might not know them yet, points like that. So maybe the rest of you can also think, do you agree with Amanda? Is that kind of what caused the shift, or what other factors were out there? But before we get to that, Orsola, where was your point of departure?
I have no idea. I don't remember at all.
Too much has happened.
I also sound really loud. Maybe don't. I frightened my own ears. I don't remember, but I do know that for me it was creative, and I am a designer, and I started designing, but I also always wanted to use things that were already there, not because at that point it felt like saving the world. It really did feel like saving my jumper, but that was the purpose. And then I saved my jumper, and then loads of others' jumpers, and so that was the journey. Obviously, at some point along the journey, I realized how much the industry was changing. But nevertheless, for me, it was about reusing poetically what was left behind for that reason. Of course, as I realized the waste, it increased. I produced in Italy, in the Veneto region. I run my brand with my partner Filippo, who is, as you mentioned, speaking later. And we witnessed a change in the industrialization as we all know it. We witnessed a beautiful story sort of being shut and removed from our eyesight. And that was the act of the industry around the 90s, moving towards developing and now developed countries. So it was physical. You know, we witnessed really the loss of something, you know, and any loss is dangerous to the whole of the organism. So when we saw factory after factory closing in Italy, we knew that there was somehow more to the creative process. Obviously, we started with Esthetica, which we co-founded in 2006 for the British Fashion Council, and that was very much a turning point. Again, mostly because we became aware of how much creativity can play a part in being a change. If we think differently, if we adapt our ways of making things to become more efficient, to be including common sense and occasionally even a little bit of sense of humor, then we can tackle things in a different way. And Esthetica taught me also personally this concept of things being small but perfectly formed and perfectly replicable. So it's not necessarily about one brand becoming enormous, but the power of having thousands of teeny-weeny ones. And that's where my passion lies still. And then, of course, we started Fashion Revolution in 2013, and I guess that is the moment when I got angry, and I think a lot of us did. Mm-hmm. I think the Rana Plaza disaster was something that was both predicted and avoidable, and I think anyone that worked in this space knew that. And that's when Fashion Revolution was born. That was the moment that we said, okay, no, this is enough. And, you know, together with the creativity, together with the storytelling, together with the platforms, together with academia, we've just got to do something bigger, stronger, wider, more noisy, because, you know, we cannot keep exploiting. We need to change our culture towards appreciating rather than exploiting, and towards, you know, reducing rather than mass producing. So, and that's been my story ever since. I'm very proud to say that I feel the most comfortable when I mentor these young designers that I think will take over the future, and that I feel huge positivity from the new designers coming up in this space.
And I think that's such a great message to hear. Everybody's looking hopeful into a future that looks otherwise quite bleak these days. Let's get back also to what made some of these things work, especially what campaigns worked, why the time was ready for them. But first, Sara, you're kind of the new kid on the block here.
Exactly. Kind of stand out a bit, yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also, of course, about the festival and how that comes into play when we see this whole field and how it's developed?
Sure. So actually, I also have a fashion background, but I sort of stumbled into the whole fashion landscape like 15 years ago, working as a model for Wolfgang Joop's label Wunderkind, while I was finishing my study, media and political communication. And then when I finished, Wolfgang approached me and said, you know, I really want to have you on board here. It was never my plan to do communications for a fashion brand, but this brand is something really special, so his approach to fashion obviously is much more an approach to art. So I was really impressed and honored being part of this team, and yeah, I jumped on board. And so then I worked basically 5 years leading the communications department for Wunderkind. But there came a moment when I kind of realized that actually to preserve this planet, we really have to become sustainable in everything we do. And fashion, of course, is part of it, and it's part of my passion as well. But we really need to take a look at the bigger picture. That's what I think. And I was looking for a bigger mission. That was basically it. And last year, then I met the fantastic team of back then the Green Tech Awards. And we honored Nico Rosbeck last year as Entrepreneur of the Year. He was so enthusiastic about this format that he basically decided to bring up a whole festival with us. And to be very honest, at this point, kind of didn't really believe that we would really make it happen in 1 year to bring this format of the awards to a whole festival with such a small team. But obviously Nico is a person, he doesn't, know any limits, and he was driving very fast with the whole team, pushing us, and we really made it work. So this May, actually, Neonyt has also been part of it. We had the debut of the Green Tech Festival, bringing 35,000 people to Berlin Tempelhof Airport, and the idea, as you've already summarized it, is really to bring people together from all over the world to inspire them with green technologies for a more sustainable lifestyle. So basically really taking it back to the big picture and bringing all the important stakeholders, people together. And I think that really worked. Really proud of my team to realize this in such a short time. And and we're really thankful to be here today because I think this is really important. Taking being part of it and bringing, growing the community. Basically, that's what we're trying to do.
Excellent. So I'd like to sort of throw one question to all of you, just to sort of map the field a bit further. Especially when you're in a certain field for a long time, some things can seem to sort of appear in cycles and not move fast enough, which is the same like feminist struggles and a lot of other social causes. So I come from a completely different field of work. This is very much sort of my bird's eye perspective, but I feel like in the 90s and early 2000s, we had a lot of attention on things like clean clothes campaigns and looking at the social part of the sustainability triangle, basically. And we're trying to raise awareness for workers' rights, and that got somewhere, but it doesn't seem to have gone further enough. Otherwise, there would not be the need for the campaign that you're thankfully pushing out to the public now. However, sustainability has these three components, and for a long time, the ecological component was kind of hidden underneath the social one in the media limelight. And now it seems also in the industry I work in tech, there's a lot more accelerator programs and initiatives supporting clean tech or green tech like yours. And it finally seems that the sort of three triangles maybe can be visible at the same time, the economic one connected to the ecological one and the social one. Is that a naive hope, or are we finally sort of getting to see all sides of the triangle when we talk about sustainability?
It feels like that to us. It feels like we're getting there, sort of. And I think also, I mentioned, okay, there's publicly available reports coming out. Not everybody's going to read those. I suppose that was a trigger for us. But obviously what's contributed to this sort of bringing together that you're talking about is we've seen the rise in effective use of social media to distribute messaging. And when you see that become more complex and more sophisticated and shared amongst all manner of demographics, that's when you get several things coming together. That's certainly, it feels like that's aided that communication to us quite a lot. Yeah.
People are very selfish, and so it's always been traditionally from the personal that you get them to become involved. So actually the game changer recently was the burning story, when Burberry and H&M were discovered burning, because people quite rightly felt, well, what a big bloody slap in the face. Things I buy, things I save up for have absolutely zero value for the brands that produce them. So that was really the moment that people, I did press for literally a month on that story.
Yeah.
While it's much harder to make somebody, say in the UK or Germany or wherever in the world, already working on 0 hours, quite underpaid, feel the plight of supply chain workers, because we're not necessarily in a better position ourselves. And so, that I feel is the difference. It's a combination between what we can really empathize with and what we really fear. And obviously we fear more the destruction of our planet than we empathize with people that are in difficult situations when we ourselves may be too. And that was a big change. The other thing that I feel made a change was the fact that campaigners started moving towards the understanding that you cannot protect people without protecting the environment as well. I'm aware of one of the few campaigns that said for us, it is people and planet. You cannot divide the two issues.
And the other way around.
And the other way around. I would like, if you have the time, maybe to go and look at our manifesto. It's on our website. I think it sets the tone for how we speak and how we see it. But the things are totally undividable as far as I am concerned and as far as Fashion Revolution is concerned. It is changing the culture, and it is moving towards a culture of a bigger respect towards people and planet, and it is also reconnecting with our own culture. I see many of technology, technological innovation can go straight back to a gut feeling and can somehow bring us within culture rather than alienate us. But for sure, our culture right now is looking at this abyss of change that we all have an urgency towards affecting. And so this is obviously taking the media and more of the interest, I think.
Well, I think after driving the two trade fairs, Ethical Fashion Show and Greenshowroom for 8 years, we decided a year or 1.5 years ago to rename it and to do a new concept. And that was not without reason, because we experienced also over the years that a lot of people were coming up to us and asking what's the difference between green and ethical? And I said, it's not. Of course, both the words and also it is about sustainability, and it is about social and ecological aspects, of course, and it always was in our understanding. And I got the feeling now when we talk about sustainability in fashion, actually, in a professional understanding, people are involving both the topics together. So it is not split anymore. It's a bit different talking to consumers. And if we are talking about consumerism, we are talking about moral questions, how to empathize with other workers, for example. You've been talking about that. But I don't think that consumption is something moral we do, because it's another psychology behind it. All of us, we are consumers. We don't consider moral questions while consuming, and I don't think that it is to expect from consumers either. So I think the responsibility actually lies with the companies and also platforms like us and change makers to provide the right products, the social and ecological aspects and economical aspects inbound.
I need to correct you. We're not consumers. None of us are consumers. If we were, we would have much less of a problem. We are users. If we look at the etymology, and I've said this billions of times, so forgive me for those who have heard this, but the etymology of the word consumer is from the Latin consumere, and that means to wear out and to dispend by use, meaning to really, really, really consume. And right now, things are passing through us way more rapidly than ever before. So to a certain extent, it's also let's reappropriate that word and become consumers. I mean, I consume, I'm sure all of us consume, but we should reappropriate the word and do it.
Yeah, that's really nice. Actually, we should switch with our language to not to talk about consumption, but using the stuff. And it would be so nice that that we would see more concepts out there where actually consumers are like shifting towards users.
I know it's semantics, but language is I think the real evolution of the last 10 years is language.
It matters and it's super powerful, and it's also a topic that's featured in different sessions here on stage. We had a fantastic panel yesterday on menstruation, and language is a very key issue, especially looking at the German language and how certain things are labeled and how to get those out of a taboo and a niche. And of course, the same is true for all the other fields that you're working in. I just want to bring you in quickly on the previous question.
Sure.
Do you feel, especially with the festival that you're hosting, I'm sure that's kind of an assumption that's true for you. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the financial backing to do something that you're doing and the time for that now.
No, for sure. Basically, we also had a big name change last year. Coming from the Green Tech Awards, we decided to take out this tech out of the name, and now we call Green Awards to basically express even more this holistic approach. And we also realized that technologies, they're kind of abstract to the people. So when we, try to explain or promote the new solar panels or whatever technologies, people were kind of, well, what does this basically has to do with me? So now with this new approach, we're really trying to make the people understand that it's not only, about how we move or how we dress, but also, what we eat, how we live in future, and that's like really something we want to address.
And how are you dealing with the point that Magdalena just brought up? We always tend to push all the responsibility to the lowest denominator of power, which is the end user. And really, that is just one puzzle piece. But the power of the industry and the producers and the marketers behind that, how are you trying to address that with your festival?
Exactly. So that's really why we came up with the Green Leaders Conference. That's where we kind of really want to gather the people in power, but the important stakeholders. We want to bring together investors with, the new startups, with the people behind the brands and the new companies. And basically the plan was also to not only talk, but really pinpoint and bring them down to decisions to, for example, declare on stage a new commitment for the next year. We didn't manage it this year, but this is really something we want to address for 2020, that we're not only discussing, but bringing people together, this is key, and that's also something we are aiming at with our academy. So throughout the whole year, we are basically accompanying the startups and trying to bring them on track, like we did with Clever Shuttle, bringing them together with Toyota for a certain cooperation, this kind of things. This is the one thing we do, and I think it's really important.
So what have been the things where you feel, okay, this has actually changed? This is something that I can totally tell. This is a different level of conversation we're having. These are different topics we're talking about. And where are the things where you feel like, oh, it's been 10 years and maybe people are more ready to listen, but we're talking about the same issue and nothing really has changed much?
Yeah, I think for us, what's an agenda that we're needing to push. In fact, there was a really beautiful exhibition on at the V&A, I don't know whether any of you caught it, in London, called Fashion from Nature. And it really sought to situate our understanding of ourselves and what we do with nature and how we take from nature and place us within nature. We're not outside. As human beings, I think we have historically seen ourselves as outside of nature, and that's there for us to take and plunder. And the exhibition told the story very beautifully right the way throughout history about what the effects of doing that would be, and now here we are living it. And so I suppose for us as an organisation, what's important for us now in this expo at the end of January is to really underline that. We've underscored it many times through basically choice of materials and how we speak about them. But now that we're seeing, for example, the Caring Group have just announced actually a partnership with the Savory Institute, so an agricultural organisation, which is quite surprising for a luxury conglomerate, or so you would think. But it's really to bring home the connection that we have with the living world and how we our place with the living world. So really around regenerative agriculture. And people say, why are you talking about farming with fashion? And then when they learn a little more, they get it. But we've lost track. We've been disconnected from that root, which is the cotton is grown in a field and what happens to that field. The wool is grown on the back of an animal and what happens through that process of taking that fiber, etc. So it's really making those stories much more explicit that reconnects people with what we're doing with nature.
And also perhaps just bring the different players within the industry closer together. That was an issue that featured yesterday. It's like how much about where your products come from that you work with do you know as a designer? How much about your trade and your handicraft do you know as a designer? And how to create more visibility for what matters along that value chain. What are the things that you feel haven't moved and the ones that you feel like, yes, we really have changed something here?
I think one of the key words is collaboration. I think we've been discussing, we are still discussing the same topics because we are still looking at really bad working conditions. We are still looking at really bad chemicals used in the supply chains. We are looking at water pollution, air pollution, and everything. So from the ground topics, it's not have changed. It will not change because it's just like it. I mean, it's like the second biggest polluting industry in this world. And I mean, how many people are suffering from the textile industry? I don't know how many, the numbers, But I mean, what have changed and what we achieved is, I think, an understanding in the industry that these huge problems are not solved by ourselves. I mean, you need to collaborate to really, to find ways to actually solve these problems because it's so global problems, they're so big. It's not working if you're only working as your own company in your own little world because everything's connected. You're working with the same suppliers. If you want to change something, you need to collaborate. And this is something which I think is really good. But anyway, I feel a bit disappointed, to put it nicely, because I was so much more optimistic 10 years ago, and I thought in 10 years we will move the industry, we will change the industry much more. And if you see the numbers, the growing numbers of textiles produced, you see the development of prices going down, and I mean, you see what has changed. You see that the topic is omnipresent. It's like the Copenhagen Fashion Summit has a big stage. I mean, the discussion moved to the CEO levels. But anyway, what really in hard facts has changed is just too little.
Yeah.
It's
in fact, I'm going to be way less nice than you. And I'm going to say that nothing's changed fast enough because we've been told for 10 years that the onus is on us, is on citizens, this voting with your wallet crap. Frankly, the onus is completely 100% on brands, corporation and governments. And if the collaboration that they're talking about is them sitting together, scratching their stomachs at the Copenhagen Fashion Summit, that's not cooperative enough. We need to talk about open sourcing solutions. We need to talk about really tackling the issues in the type of collaboration that's practical and that makes change. It's not any longer about the conversation. We've had the conversation. We really need to move to action, I think.
Do you feel that that time is now? I mean, just looking at how the world has grown tired of watching political leaders fly to the most beautiful places for climate change discussions and leave without any kind of result. And now finally we have a next generation of politicized youth, which we haven't had for the last 20 years, at least in Europe, really taking to the streets and trying to reclaim their future. So is that a critical point in time we have reached?
It is a critical point, but there is also the understanding that we've been patronizing this industry forever and ever from when we started it without listening to all the millions of stakeholders we could have listened to way earlier. This is why I am so impassioned with the concept of reusing and upcycling, because it's autochthonous to mankind. We all do it. So we have an opportunity to actually listen from different cultures in what they have done for millennia in order to be efficient and in order to make ends meet, which is, where we need to go back to, frankly. We need to go back to a kind of intelligent frugality and a way of really stopping this mass production and accelerated disposal. Because at the end of the day, everything that we have ever thrown away is still here, because there is no away. So in this sense, I feel that, really now, I mean, I'm guilty of flying. I understand my own contradiction that I came here flying. I try to do 4 or 5 things wherever I go now. But the pressure is piling, and that's it. The pressure is piling.
And again, like what you said earlier, so true to that too, the responsibility on you as the end consumer and zero pressure on any of the big, especially transportation providers, or not enough to come up with alternative solutions. Sorry, you wanted to add?
No, I just want to say that I do think things have really changed on the consumer side. If I look at my younger sisters, that's a completely different approach of how they consume and how they really question products, how they question companies' labels. I'm really impressed. And exactly as you just mentioned, the flying thing, like when we discuss our family traveling plans, it's my young sisters to say, hey, listen, we won't take a plane. I'm really, and to be honest, my sisters are really spoiled. So I was like speechless, like, all right, if if you're ready for that. And I'm really impressed. I'm really optimistic with this new generation growing up there, the Fridays for Future and everyone around it. And all my hope is on them, to be honest, because there's so much power, and obviously they take care of it. That's there's.
We've got a long time to go before this generation is in the seats of power, though. So in the meantime, we have to use our behavior to usher in the changes that we want to see happen.
I can also get a bit angry on these discussions, and I think none of you is actually meaning it like this, but it is not on them, it's on us. It's us to change, and it's our responsibility, ourselves, and every one of us here in this room and anywhere. And we can't wait for the next generation to do it, and it's not okay to actually put the pressure on them. And I think it is actually pretty frightening to see that there's kids going on the street and fighting for the future, that they actually have to do this because their voices are not heard, and people are just not taking the responsibility to saving the fucking future.
And what's even more frightening is that we've got most of our politicians in power saying, don't do that because you know nothing. I mean, that's the, I think even more frightening part to it. So let's talk for a moment about political frameworks and regulation, because in a number of sessions yesterday, so many great ideas came up for this needs to change, because without change in regulation, it's not going to happen, whether it's repair-friendly taxation, less taxation for second-hand shop, etc. What are the key sort of regulatory factors that you feel need to change right now?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we've just had the worst experience in the UK when it comes to regulation, because we had an opportunity, and the wonderful UK government that we have in place at the moment, bless them, only set us back another 20 years by absolutely not looking at any one of the recommendations of a public inquiry, the Environmental Audit Committee, which was chaired by the brilliant Mary Cray, and that really brought to the attention
Yeah.
what could be done by a government when it comes to finding solutions. Nothing was
We're
accepted.
not even talking about Brexit.
We're not even talking about Brexit. No, we're talking about this inquiry which launched in February, and literally some of the recommendations were pretty common sense. Removing VAT from mending and repairing. There was one that was a total tokenism about putting a tax on fast fashion. The tax wasn't big enough, but at least it was a conversation starter. And the loveliest one, to reintroducing making as part of the school curricula. What jerk would not consider that when we actually know that we're having a crisis, even when it comes to surgery, because our children aren't making anymore, so they don't know how to stitch or be precise. You know, as I said, you know, any loss to a biosystem is a loss to all of us. Losing the making element, losing the crafts, is as bad as losing animals and rhinoceroses and all that. We're losing seamstresses, pattern makers, embroiderers, woodcutters.
Yes, totally agree. We both just, it's unbelievable reaction was just like, no. Like, it seemed like a no-brainer. Recommendations that seemed like, why would you not?
Why would you
What's
not?
the reason for not? Really, really.
While in France, and I would have thought the UK government would like a little bit of competition with the French, but not this time. In France, they're moving towards more legislative, you know, in terms of transparency, in terms of disposal.
How do they get away with it? I mean, I read that the...
well, they got away with Brexit,
well,
so I mean, at the moment, they're getting away with a
I don't know
lot.
if I want to ask this question, but, you know, the same government managed to get in the press with a zero emissions by some close-by date thing.
And anti-slavery, they're also really looking at, you know, the UK led with the anti-slavery, and, you know, even Theresa May talked about, you know, looking at slavery in our supply chains. It baffles me. I don't understand it. I never will understand it, so I'm going to stop talking about it now.
Puzzling and not good enough, really. And look, in view of our government here in Germany and also EU regulation, are you a little bit more hopeful? And are there things on the agenda where you feel like, okay, this is what we're pushing now for currently that you would like to see come through?
I think we actually need to change the politicians, because, I mean, looking at the government and also the politicians in Germany, I mean, it's like, what generation is represented, and and all the other questions. I don't go into this, no. No, I don't.
Because there are great examples. I mean, we've mentioned Sweden over and over, and other countries seem to have made some advances, not just in the fashion industry, but also like concerning food waste and other issues. So it doesn't seem like it's completely hopeless.
There are lots of policy advancements. Again, I am the creative director at Fashion Revolution, so I wish that my policy director, Sara, was here, but she's not. So I will simply suggest that maybe you visit Fashion Revolution and our Fashion Transparency Index, or wait for our white paper that will launch in the autumn, and all of this information will be there. There are legislative changes, there are moves ahead, but there are so many moves backwards as well.
Mm-hmm. What about technological frameworks that has changed in the sense of, this whole world of digital innovation helping the cause that we're discussing today in any way?
I think there's happening a lot basically right now. We're talking to a lot of companies, obviously, in regards to our exhibition. So we had over 60 exhibitors from all over the world. Basically, for example, exhibiting the first air taxis, which hopefully be on the market soon. Volocopter, for example, a German company, they will launch their first Voloport this year, but obviously none of them are really getting the support from the political system. It's like, that's why we're saying we're helping them to get investors from outside. We're to get them on track in this. But that's basically also a reason why we kind of excluded so far politics in our festival, which I think we should overthink for next year, because only if you get everyone at one table, you can really start to change things. But also, they didn't really approach us. It was like we invited them to the conference, and it's kind of, I think they are scared, to be honest. It's like, no.
I think there is an element of newness with technology, and we're placing a little bit too much hope on it. It's a little bit what you were saying about the younger generation. We really cannot wait for technology to save us. For me, the whole conversation around recycling and the separating of cotton from polyester has been one of the biggest waste of time of the last few years, because while we concentrated on talking about that repeatedly at several different conferences, in roundtables and individually, none of us was actually looking at the fact that we were still producing over 150 billions of garments of clothing, and that's only clothing, per year. So here we are talking about recycling and mass producing and mass disposing at the same time. So for me, the whole point about technology is that we really, as I said before, we can wait for it. We need to link it to our instincts. I think a really interesting example is transparency technology. Apps such as, Good on You, or even our own Fashion Transparency Index. They can be seen as totally fast forward, but they also link us back with our gut, in the sense traceability. It's important for humans to know where the clothes are made for all sorts of reasons. It's not just to safeguard the environment, but also clothing as a status and so on and so forth. I'm loving that new technology around this new app in particular, Save Your Wardrobe, using technology to bring us back to the act of mending. So for me, again, we have to look at technology, but marry it with what we've already got. It can't be just us jumping into the unknown. There has to be lots of smaller actions that we know human beings have been taking for centuries, and then we can jump into the technology
I
as
think
well.
treating it as a tool,
Yeah.
another tool in our armory of tools, but
Exactly.
to be deployed with a rational approach.
Yeah.
And
An
not
emotional
just
approach as
and
well.
yes, I think so, anchoring it to sort of what it means to be a human, and also how effective it is in relation to the issues that we know are really high on the agenda.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem. Often people, I agree with you, Orsola, will think that technology, once we get that will sort everything out.
Yeah.
It's not, it's just a different tool.
I think it's interesting because if you look at our hashtag, Who Made My Clothes, that answers to me, because that's technology. So that's a hashtag. This is, over the last God knows how many years, we didn't have hashtags before. And yet, who made my clothes? It's such a human question. It brings you to a human from another human. It brings you somewhere. It leads you. And that's what I'm interested in. And I'm interested in disruption from a cultural point of view. And again, apologies, I've said this squillions of times. But transparency is a tool and a technological tool, but it is also a massive cultural shift for an industry that's completely built on opacity and closed doors. So you suddenly say, okay, do it with an app, do it with a computer, but open yourself up to scrutiny and accountability. So it's got a double use. That's how I like to think of technology for the future.
Oh, there's so much in there that we could keep debating. We had a fascinating conversation yesterday, from everything to do with the data that you submit when you go shopping and your body size, and how that could be used in political context, and the sort of awareness the fashion industry is just embarking on when it comes to also using data to create more agency for the work that we're trying to do, to this whole communication strategy, and how do we create empathy and by making the world a bit more of a closer space. So. Yeah.
But if we can look at body positivity as a quick example, as women, we were obviously gagging for it, because we've taken to our Instagrams with our cellulite and our stretch marks with pride and joy. So it means that when you open a door, shoom, things can flood in. I hope that it will be the same with the fashion environment and so on.
Now that you've brought up a gender aspect, I was wondering, is it by chance that we're all women on this panel, or do you feel that there is that says something about the field that you work in as well?
It's always the way. Yes, we always say the same faces, and it is. You look around the room. Hi, guys, but there's a lot of mainly women, right? It's so interesting.
I mean,
It says a lot.
I've just taken. I'm only looking at my phone because this is. I hope you feel the same. The time is passing so quickly, so I want to make sure we have a little bit of time left for your questions and comments. And I think we should be opening it up just now. So if you want to give me a sign of hand, if you want to join the conversation, ask a question or comment on something that's been said. A gentleman in the second row. Okay, here's how this goes. You see the cube. Okay, I don't get. Yes, exactly. Thank you. And you speak into the black round bit.
I had the same question as you did about men in this space, and I'm wondering if there is an answer. I mean, I've got a comment saying the same faces, but who are the men leading this? And
But yes, of course there are. I mean, you know, we really have to look at this from an equality point of view, not a competitive point of view. It's not like suddenly, finally, it's all women. That will never be finally, nor, you know, it tends to be more women. Fashion tends to be female, and maybe, as with body diversity, we were really wanting to get into this space because we feel that it's ours. But I'm hoping never to the exclusion of anyone else. I mean, if we learn from our mistakes, if we had always been equal, we wouldn't be here, because we would have had a totally different idea about war or, you know, expansion or whatever, but we've never been equal. So I hope that the whole point of this is that we will be.
I actually find it a bit ridiculous that we are talking and that we are discussing that we're having a female panel. Why don't we just take it as normal?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I'm sorry, but I mean, it is totally normal that we are used to look at panels, totally male panels, and no one would ever question this in a male panel. Why is actually only men on this panel?
That's true.
I mean, really, I mean it like this. Can we please stop it and take it for granted and normal that sometimes there are sitting men on a panel, sometimes there's females on a panel, so just like our world is. Sometimes there's genderless people sitting on a panel. I mean, why are we discussing this in this space?
Yeah,
True.
Are there more questions and comments? There's one in the back. So you gentlemen with the cube, if you feel good about throwing that cube to the lady with a hat in the back, or passing it on. It's more fun if you throw it, of course. But then there's a camera next to her, so maybe it's safer this way. Off you go.
Hello. I was wondering if each of you could maybe make a statement to the question of what's next now. Because that's the question of the panel, and somehow I don't know what's next now, and I'd like to hear what you have to say to that. Thank you.
What's next?
Give it a start.
well, I don't know either. If I did, I probably wouldn't be here. I would be making it happen.
Is there something, I mean, we talked a little bit about regulation and what could or should be next, but that came to a little bit of a disappointing end in terms of hopefulness, and a little bit about technology. Are there other economic settings, other business models, other parameters that have changed?
Can we really point it down to one thing? I mean, I think it's important to know that there has to be a next, and that the next has to be different to the now. But really to pinpoint it all into it should be this or that, we're back into this singling things out. It's like if everybody only wanted hemp would not be sustainable. So we just need to understand that maybe, yes, maybe what's next is simply diversity. But it's difficult to really focus, for me at least, on one.
I can
I
say what
agree.
I hope's next. Sorry,
No,
to interrupt you. I can say what I hope is next is just what seems to be this groundswell, this interest. It feels like it is. I hope I'm not imagining it. Is just a collective enlightenment that kind of grows, that we are each responsible, as we said before, for our actions, and even those tiny little actions can make a difference. And I suppose it's just interest, and I think we can feel that in the exchange of ideas, in school children being mobilized. All of a sudden we've got, 1.5 million school children being mobilized by kind of one voice really quite quickly. That's the kind of thing that I hope is what's next, is that just reinforcing itself and reaching a critical mass that will impel the change that Orsula's talking about, that we don't just keep talking in circles, and that does galvanize change. That's what I hope is what's next.
Well, my vision is actually that we stop talking about sustainable fashion and that we are actually talking about fashion, and we don't need to consider like sustainability as like a sole topic. So this is going to be a self-understanding that fashion is made in a social responsible way and under like human conditions and also without any harmful chemicals. That's a vision. So this is hopefully what's next. What kind of time frame I can put on this vision, I don't know. So I mean, we can actually think about like what time frame is next. It's like, are we talking about 100 years? Are we talking about 10 years? Are we talking about 2 years? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm also sorry because I can't answer the question. All I can say is our approach of the Green Tech Festival, and I think also of the Neonyt, is really to provide a global platform for people, for the companies who are brave and bold enough to question the old system and to challenge the people in power. That's our contribution. That's what we're trying to do. And yeah, I really hope it will bring us forward, and I truly believe so.
I'm going to attempt a short summary. Maybe the question, what is next, is better the question than what is new, because in this growth and change-driven world, we need to excite people about innovation and the future without having to create new things all the time, but still see them as modern and futuristic. So I will attempt that as my summary of a lot of the things that have been said here on stage, but I can tell you what's next after this. Because the next panel starting here in just about, we're going to give ourselves a quick break, so just under 10 minutes, let's say 2:05, is on upcycling. And as we already mentioned, your partner is going to be joining that panel as well as some other leading experts of the field. And I'm very much looking forward to that discussion, although I'm very sad that this one is ending, because I feel I could have spent another couple of hours with you on stage. Thank you so much for your time and sharing some of your insights and especially your passion with us here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.